Greetings, Phil. This is me, Women29, and doing a direct upload, so this might not come out as clear as I'd like. But I believe it was a year ago that I came across your video on Job, and I also have still been thinking about Job. And it's a little bit different as before when I made a response to your first video a year ago. It's great that we could come ahead a year and kind of share what we learned over the course of a year and our views about it. For me, I just happened to think of this, and it's probably a good topic for a book by somebody. Me, I'm not a good writer. I wouldn't be able to do this, but in the course of doing the background literature for the series of hell that I'm doing, I read the ancient Near Eastern literature before, but just kind of breezed through it. Now I'm looking at it closer, and text from Mesopotamia are extremely important in Jewish literature, and I never realized its importance until I started reading it a lot more closely. And Job is from that area, and I have reason to believe, and many others also have the hypothesis that this text should be could be written in the Babylonian, right at the captivity. Kind of like questioning why people were suffering in a foreign land. And I happen to think, reading the descent text of Descent of Ishtar, Descent of Inanna, and also the text of Erra and Ishum. Now, Erra was a deity of plagues, of war, of pestilence, and of suffering, so to speak. And when I was reading that text, and the descent text of Inanna and Ishtar, I finally understood why the beginning of Job was put on and the end of Job. People speculated about it, thinking there was, an add-on to that philosophy, because you have the first couple chapters, it's how Job lost everything. Then you have the philosophical discourse. Then you have the ending where the Creator gives him everything back. And I happen to think the text of the descents, as they go through the gates to the underworld, they lose everything. Coming out of Israel into a foreign nation was like coming out of life and going into death, going into the underworld. So they lose everything. On the ascent, you get everything back. You go through the 7 gates, and everything is given back. They're promised everything back. So here is a text not only of the idea of looking at suffering, philosophy of suffering, and what is it. It's also a text of a descent and a resurrection, which is pretty amazing that you could combine this idea with philosophy. It's beautiful. And so you get Job's wife, who says curse God and die. These could be the Jews who later gave up on ever forming a nation, said Babylon's awesome, let's just live here. The friends of Job could be like the prophets, sitting around telling the people that they messed up. Meanwhile, the people are like, we don't think we did anything. And it's pretty interesting. I would compare the Satan to Erra, because in that, and in some of these Mesopotamian texts, you have 7 demons also inflicting different things. So you'd have the demon of wind, you'd have the demon of... But here, Erra, he's the specific deity from Mesopotamia that would do that sort of thing. Ishum is he's the intercessor. So here you have the good impulse out of Judaism and the evil impulse. And in these texts, there's no theology. There's no free will theology. They accepted punishment as it came. And whatever the gods willed, they had no say in it. It just happened. They may ask why it happened. However, it was more or less, the deities will afflict who they will afflict, and will reward who they will reward. And you get a little bit of this in the Odyssey. So no matter how many hecatombs was offered to Neptune or Jupiter, he could punish you at will. And I think that's how the Hebrews were viewing it as they sat and dreamed of their homeland. In real life, unfortunately, good people suffer and bad people suffer. And unfortunately, most of the time, we don't get everything back. So the idea of free will is fairly new. It's fairly new theology. And I don't think it existed back that far. Things happened because they happened. And here, you're talking about Satan, but in the Mesopotamian viewpoint, there wasn't this evil thing. He was just there as part of the construct of the cosmos. He was there. And he was the inflictor of pain and the inflictor of disease. And it just happened to everybody, and you accepted it. So I guess it's far different than blaming man himself for suffering through perceived disobedience of something, because even those who obey suffer. Even Adam in the garden, he suffered. He was lonely. He didn't have an opposite. He didn't have a second self. So he's split in half. The deity makes a second half from a rib or whatnot, and he ends up having a companion. So that's pretty interesting. So that's kind of what I was thinking about. So if you look at some of those texts, it can be pretty interesting. But so take care, Phil, and nice to see you back on. And I'll take a look at some more of your videos. Haven't talked to you in a while, but be well, and remember, if everybody's thinking alike, then somebody isn't thinking.